Yeah, I just want to share a couple things with you. You notice I don't have a watch. You know, in Latin America, a minute is as an hour, and an hour is as a minute. First off, a scripture that's always been impacting to me, and I kind of liken it to. It's the Great Commission for bikers. I think we're all familiar with the Great Commission of Matthew and the one in Mark. But there's a special one that we find in Luke. It's in chapter 14, verse 23. It starts out exactly the same. It says, Go out into the highways and hedges and compel people to come in, that my house may be filled. The Bible is just an incredible document, a written document that was created like none others over thousands of years by dozens of men, was completed some 2,000 years ago, but yet is just as relevant today as it was when it was created. And I realized that when that verse was penned, you know, in that context, to go out into the highways and hedges pretty much meant to walk. But we have to, you know, we know God knew, you know, the length of time that would transpire till He would come back, and how His Word would have to speak to many generations and many cultures, that I just picture that verse, that going out into the highways and hedges, that we could see the progression. And that it went from walking and then going out on your burro or your donkey, and then maybe out on your horse and your chariot, and then to buggies. And then it finally came to a point in time where going out onto the highways and into the hedges, the small roads, was done with motorcycles. Yeah. So this verse for me is the Great Commission for bikers, for motorcyclists. And I think He even took into account all the different types of motorcycles, because He said highways and hedges. So we've got the cruisers, and we got the sport tours, and we got the dual sports and the trail bikes, all included in those verses. So I want to just briefly, I hope it's brief, share on one particular pastor that's working those hedges, the small byways, and it's a very unique person in a situation where these hedges, if you will, are urban hedges, and he goes into some of the dark places in the back alleys of downtown Managua, Nicaragua. I don't know if we could put up a picture. I've got a picture of a pastor. This is Pastor Oscar. Some of you actually know him. I shared a little bit about him. I got the privilege to be at the National West. But this is a very special man that I'm excited to share about him at any time and at any place. I've heard his testimony so many times, and every time, I mean, I am moved and impacted by it. I believe we've all gone through, you know, the first time is when God started working on us, and we arrived to our point of conversion and salvation. We quite often struggle with, or I know I did, is that, you know, I'm not good enough. And I think we've all struggled with things that, you know, I've done such and such a thing in my past, there's no way I can become a Christian. Or we've come to the point where we've gotten past that and we've let Christ come in, but maybe we get paralyzed or we get stopped up in our service because there's still nagging things in our past that just continually beat on us, that says, I can't do this, I can't serve, I can't face these people because of the things I've done and because of my past. Well, here's a man that I hope can bring some encouragement. I know many of you have, we all have a testimony, and they're all valid, and they're all powerful, and they're all of God. But here's one that I just hope can bring encouragement, and just, you know, another case that shows it doesn't matter who we are, where we've come from, or what we've done. God can reach you, bring you out of the lowest depths, His love has no boundaries or limits, and the future is before us if we will embrace it. So here's Pastor Oscar. He looks like another typical Nicaraguan pastor, pretty unassuming, you know, joyful, happy guy. He pastors a church of, 50 to 60 women and children. But Oscar is anything but typical, past or present. Oscar, unfortunately, his young part of his youth was during a very turbulent time in Nicaragua's history. Throughout the 70s and the 80s, 2 civil wars that were back to back, and Oscar got caught up into that. Things began, and he grew up in a horrendous household environment, an incredibly abusive father that beat him and literally tortured him and his brothers in their own household, and then entered the first Civil War, fighting against the Somoza dynasty dictatorship. He witnessed atrocities that occurred to his very own family. He watched his brother be tortured and burned alive before him by the Somoza Guard. So as a very young man, as a young boy, Oscar had an incredible amount of bitterness, of hate, and just severe mixed up and uncontrollable anger. Well, then immediately, 1979, throughout the 80s, the Second Civil War, the Sandinistas, the Contra War, it looked like that was an answer that would feed or fulfill his anger. He joined the Sandinista army. He became a recruiting officer. But the recruitment there was kind of a draft system that you did not say no to. He was part of a special team that went and basically they see you, they grab you, you're in the army now. And so he was on one of these special draft units, and he discovered that one of the greatest recruiting grounds was the evangelical church. So him and his squad, they would raid churches and church services and publicly humiliate, abuse, and eventually torture and even killed evangelical pastors if they would not give up the young boys of their congregation to draft into the Sandinista army. He did this for a few years. He did it well. He was promoted, went up through the ranks. Oscar was then assigned to, and he got into military intelligence, and he found himself in a special ops unit. He essentially became a black ops hitman. He became part of a clandestine death squad. And his intelligence identified certain individuals that were felt to be a threat to the Sandinista cause. This unit, Oscar, would take care of them and they would disappear. So a very, still a very troubled man, angry, and all these events continued to feed his anger until one day it kind of ran out. The anger and feeding it through physical aggression only can last so long, and he finally hit the bottom where he could take it no longer. He was not shy, well, he's not proud, but he would confess in his testimony that the Sandinista party and the Sandinista army was his God. That's what he lived for. He believed for them, what they stood for. He served them with his entire being. But then after a few years of all this, it came up empty. It didn't work for him anymore. Feeding the anger no longer worked. Somehow, and this is only, part of the plan of God, he got out of that unit, which most people do not. Once you're in these kind of units, you're in for life, or you disappear. But somehow, with just the hand of God, unbeknownst to him, was on his life. He got out, he left this unit, he actually left the Army, and he went over to the East Coast. He was going to try to get away from it all. Get away, you know, Managua and most of the population of Nicaragua is all on the Pacific or the West Coast. And then the East Coast of the Caribbean side is very desolate, very remote, difficult to get to. So we went over there to kind of hide and just, you know, disconnect from life. He got a job pretty quickly, and his job, he became a drug trafficker. The East Coast is part of the drug pipeline from Colombia on its way up to the States here. And because he does things well, he became a very good drug runner. And then, of course, he became a consumer of it, and you know, started falling even deeper into despair. Drug addict, drug runner. Worked his way somehow through all this mess and disaster. He found a wife. Worked his way back to Managua. His wife found the Lord, was a Christian, regularly went to church. And so as they're back in, okay, the war has ended. 1990, the war has ended. So we're into the early 90s. This is like 91, 92. I was back in Managua, was with his wife. And so his wife regularly attends church, she's faithful. And so one day, Oscar, as he wakes up from one of his stupors, he's hungry, and he wants food. And he's furious because he can't find his wife. Where's my wife? She needs to be cooking me some food. And so as he's out, you know, tearing around outside, you know, he's told that his wife's in church. And so he storms down there and he gives the account on how he was going to burst into that church and he was going to find his wife and he was going to grab her by the hair and drag her home, and it's like, fix me my food, woman. So he gets to the church and he bursts in, and you know, he's looking around and he can't find his wife right off. But the pastor motions him to come. We got a seat right up here. So, you know, begrudgingly he comes up there and sits down. And the Lord kind of got a hold of him that day, kind of paralyzed him in that chair. He couldn't find his wife, and when he left that evening, he was a saved man. He had given his life over to the Lord. So now to fast forward a few years, you know, became you know, member of the church and was discipled, and you know, healing to take place within his marriage. But fast forward to the ministry that he's involved with today. You know, I said that he's a pastor, what seemed like would be typical pastor of women and children. You know, what's unique about this church of women and children is they're all ex-prostitutes and young girls rescued off the streets and out of brothels. He is now the country director and a pastor of a ministry called House of Hope, Casa Esperanza, and is specifically a ministry to rescuing and saving women out of that life of prostitution, and rescuing little girls, you know, and some that are already in it, and as a preventative measure. You say, in the ministry, there's about 50 to 60 women that live or interned on site, but then he also has a tremendous evangelistic ministry out on the streets. And this motorcycle is used in urban warfare, and he runs the streets and to these brothels in downtown Managua, and has done several rescue missions where he has a relationship with certain members of the police, and he's kind of unofficially been deputized, and they do raids when they get a tip on underage girls, and they go and bust these girls out. And that motorcycle has been used to ride little girls out of brothels from downtown Managua to House of Hope. He also has birthed and oversees and has led different cell groups There are now 8 or 9 different cell groups in the different neighborhoods that are popular with the women. The women are, there's a tremendous self-movement now happening amongst the women. What began in the first days with 2 women, with 2 ladies that came off the street and got saved, now on the special outreach days, every Tuesday, there's a weekly gathering where they actually bring the women in off the streets for an evangelistic time of worship and a Bible study and a word, and then they do a physical handcraft. It is now almost 500 women at this point in time that have come together, and Oscar is hugely been responsible in that. So yeah, from a man to the depths of anger and despair and bottomed out on drugs and the sordid military past that he had, it does not matter. God uses us all. His love, His forgiveness, He erases anything that we could possibly have done. And yeah, just to see and to know what God can do with just one man that says, yes, here am I surrender myself to you. Again, just thank you that you make all this possible. There's just story after story of incredible men of God doing works for the kingdom, and with your partnership, just helping to mobilize them better through motorcycles is a huge blessing, a huge gift. You say, I don't have the numbers, Glenn's the numbers man, but just be it told that over the last 20-some years, we've given out thousands of motorcycles, bicycles, boats, boat motors, and we even have an account of a horse that we've given out. And thank you, thank you, thank you.